Electricast.
This episode is brought to you by Shopify. Whether you're selling a little or a lot, Shopify helps you do your thing, however you cha-ching. From the launch your online shop stage, all the way to the we just hit 1 million orders stage. No matter what stage you're in, Shopify's there to help you grow. Sign up for a $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/special offer, all lowercase. That's shopify.com/special offer.
Why wait to see if you'll get something you like this Valentine's Day when you can go to BlueNile.com and find something you'll love? Whether you're looking to treat yourself to a little winter sparkle or show a galentine how much you appreciate them, Blue Nile offers a wide selection of high-quality designs, expert guidance, and free 30-day returns for the ultimate peace of mind. You can even design your own jewelry. Right now, save up to 50% at BlueNile.com. That's BlueNile.com.
On this episode of Missing the Point, Rayshawn is back with a vengeance as he rails against the Boston Celtics as the C's stumble further and further into mediocrity, and whether a change as the head coaching position is the ultimate solution for the Celtics' woes. We'll also discuss if a certain recently released NBA player can bring some much-needed attitude to a young, talented Celtics squad now featuring 2 NBA All-Stars. We'll also touch on the thriving Boston Bruins, and if, even with one of the league's best record, they can still be trusted when it comes to playoff time. This is Missing the Point, episode 41, but it's all relative.
Hello and welcome into this week's episode of Missing the Point. My name is Joe Malkin. I am your host, and I'm joined tonight by the man who we didn't even know where he was. He just disappeared and then told us he came back. He spent a little time away, and maybe he'll talk about it, maybe he won't. But Rayshawn Buchanan, welcome back. And Mike Marcangelo is also here with us. And of course, we have our EP, Craig D'Alessandro. So guys, welcoming to this week's episode of Missing the Point. We have a lot to touch on. Last week, the guys talked about the Celtics. Unfortunately, Rayshawn was unable to be there, so we're going to give him his due tonight. We'll also touch on the Bruins, but there's been an interesting move in the NBA that we also want to get to that I think Mike is very interested in getting to. So guys, let's kick it off here and start talking about these Boston Celtics. They're 15-15 coming into tonight's game. We're recording on Tuesday night, and they are currently leading the Dallas Mavericks 56-55 at the half as we begin recording this episode. So guys, 15-15, and they seem to have a tough time getting up for games. And let's start there. What has been the problem here for this team so far?
Yeah, for me, I think we talked about it a little bit last week. It's a matter of, it doesn't feel like they believe in their coach. They don't listen to him. They don't believe in what he's preaching. And that's on them a little bit, but in reality, like if you lose the room, that's on you, right? Like, so Brad Stevens has to figure it out, has to figure out how to get these guys going. And then when he gets them going, for the love of God, can you just hold on to a fourth quarter lead? We're 30 games into this season, and I am so sick of being up by 18, 20, 24 in the fourth, and losing. You can't do that. And if you do that more than once, or like once or twice, fine. But in 30 games, if you do that 5 times, that's indicative of the fact that you are a bad basketball team. Or you're just not a good one. I'll say that. Maybe they're not bad, but they're not good. They're not championship level. So for me, I think it starts and ends with Brad. And like he needs to figure it out. He hasn't figured it out yet. I guess we'll see if he does.
Ray, you've had some very strong words for the Celtics head coach, stronger than G. Willikers over there at the Garden would give himself. But what do you think of Brad Stevens' performance this season?
Well, I mean, I have to preface this by saying I used to be a supporter, right? You know, I was someone that was like, man, you know, Brad is doing a great job, you know, especially with those teams that really overachieved in his first 3 or 4 years. And then all of a sudden, you know, they've got some type of prosperity, have had some real expectations, and he's failed. He is someone that is a good coach, and that's why I'm pissed off. I'm not pissed off because he's a bad coach. I'm pissed off because you're actually a good coach, and you can't get these guys over the hump. And it's been like that since the 2017, 2018 year. You have not one, but 2 All-Stars now, right? Really 3 if you count Kemba. Yes, he's not an All-Star this year, but he's been an All-Star for 4 years in his career. So you have 3 guys that have been All-Stars, 3 guys that can get you 20 or more a game, and it's on him at this moment. And Mike wants to put it just on Brad, and I get that. And trust me, I would say 90% of Celtics Twitter, Celtics fans are putting it on Brad, and I think it's the easy take to make. We got to aim this shit at Danny Ainge. I'm sorry. Like, I don't understand how you could come into this year thinking, okay, well, we lost Hayward, and, we really haven't found a replacement for Horford. We didn't find a replacement for Kyrie. I mean, technically, Kemba coming in was that, but, you had so many guys on this roster that you really haven't found a replacement for. So at what point do we turn the pitchfork crew back to Danny Ainge? Because you're telling me that you thought you were going to win with Carson Edwards, Tremont Waters, Taco Fall, and I'm sorry, DK, because you want him as a mascot. Man, the hell with the mascot. Chair for me, chair on the couch. Do like me, chair on the couch. I don't need Taco Fall taking up a roster spot, and his ass doesn't see the court unless they're in a blowout or they're getting blown out. So I'm not here for that. Danny Ainge needs to reconstruct this roster, not next year, today. So that's where I'm at. But like I said, Brad does need to get it together, but I also put a lot of the blame on Danny Ainge as well.
Let me put this out there in the ether for both of you. And we've talked about this in the past, and it's almost as if there's a power, to me, it's almost as if there's a power struggle without there being a power struggle. And what I mean by that is when Brad Stevens was brought in to be the head coach of the Boston Celtics in 2013, to me, the idea was we're going to build from the bottom, build with youth, and develop players like he did at Butler, right? That's the kind of coach everyone saw him as. And then there's Danny Ainge, who for the 10 years prior to Brad Stevens coming in as the head coach, he was going out and getting the Ray Allens, the Kevin Garnetts of the world, right? So when you mention Al Horford, when you mention Kyrie Irving and Gordon Hayward, what's interesting is I would say of those 3 guys, the one that worked the best was Al Horford. And he's also probably on that list, he's number 3 in terms of overall talent to me. This is definitely not definitive at all. And in terms of how big his name is, he's number 3 on that list. They thought that Gordon Hayward would work because he was Brad's guy at Butler, and they wanted to bring in a guy like Kyrie, who we've seen the lasting effects of Kyrie. Mike has said this before. We've seen the lasting effects of Kyrie with Jaylen Brown and really with just about anybody that was here during that Kyrie Irving time. So I think there's a power struggle between the 2 guys at the top, the head coach and the general manager, where they're trying to make 2 styles of team building and basketball on the floor work, and it just isn't.
Yeah, I think so. I think like when you look at the totality of what Ainge has done, let's say like since Doc, right? I think he hit on Al Horford, and he needed to because that was your first max guy in a long time that's ever come here. But he also hit on IT. Like he has done pretty well supplementally throughout this, right? I don't blame him for Hayward at all because you just can't forecast that first game, that freak injury. Ray knows a little bit about something like that. And you don't know like what that's going to do to you long term, right? So Kyrie, I think, 10 times out of 10, if you have the chance to sign him, you do it. And you just figure out if it's going to work. It didn't. I mean, and I think that, what we're seeing now is, Jaylen and Jayson, like this is their team, but they still need a ringleader. And I think really any 2 young, amazing players do. Like Jordan didn't win his first until his 6th or 7th year, right? Or 6th year with Scotty. LeBron didn't win until his 9th year. So like, I think we in Boston, because of the success of other teams, put the Celtics on this trajectory. Like they made it to the Eastern Conference Finals. Like they should get there. And yes, they should get to the finals, the regular finals for sure. But I'm not expecting a championship out of them this year. I just want them to actually contend and to show me that they've learned from the past. Meaning, if you're up in a 7-game series against the Miami Heat in the 4th quarter, every single game, you better win that goddamn series. That's all I want from this team.
It's not about the path they've taken the last few years. Is they're a 17-time world champion. This is expected in the city for that franchise to win. We have been the New York Yankees of the NBA. It's that simple. So that's why people expect them to win.
Not recently, dude. Like back when they were back.
Yeah, but even with the Yankees, bro, like, yes, they're the 27-time world champions, right? 18 of those came before 1962. No one was around with Whitey Ford and Yogi Berra and Joe DiMaggio and those guys. Like, once again, I'm 10 minutes in and I'm already going in the rabbit hole. But I'm not going to get into that. But I'm looking at Joe right now. But it's just like, no, like, it's an expectation for them to win. Whether you think they're going to win is a whole other story. But it's an expectation for them to win. And I want to go back to something that Joe just said a few minutes ago. He was saying about Kyrie leaving a lasting effect. Well, the only people that's left from that era, those 2 years, are Rob Williams, Jayson Tatum, and Jaylen Brown.
Marcus Smart.
And Marcus Smart, right? Sorry, my bad. So he's the longest tenure Celtic. My bad, forgot about that. So it's just like, are we saying to get rid of them then because it's the lasting effect and he's done? He left he's been gone for 2 years. He's been gone. It's not like he's been gone for 2 years. So at what point do you get over it?
To clarify what I said, it's not a bad thing. Kyrie has had good effects on teammates in the past, and sometimes his negative antics leave positive effects. He was here when two of those four guys you just named were rookies. They were rookies the year that they played in the NBA with Kyrie, and that kind of a player, that kind of transcendent human being, because regardless of how I feel about him, what I think about him, that is what he is. He's outspoken. He's a great basketball player. He's a really interesting human being that is going to leave a lasting effect. So no, I'm not saying get rid of those guys, though a lot of teams would like to have those guys. But you are absolutely right that Danny needs to build this team. But again, I think Danny and Brad need to get on the same page, or we need to go down Mike's rabbit hole of, if that's not going to happen, without a doubt, change the head coach over the GM in this situation. Generally, I go towards the GM. In this situation, I would go towards the coach, but then I would ask Mike, who comes in? If you want it done mid-season, who comes in? And if not, who comes in at the end of the year?
Yeah, I think that's a very interesting question. I'm going to answer it, but I first just want to go back to your point about the lingering effect of Kyrie, because I think that like when you say that, people instantly think it's negative, right? I think if you look at his Celtics tenure, it was not great, but what those two can learn is, that is how you command a room and a team. Like, I want to be like him and have that clout. Perfect. And I think when they brought him in, that's when there was an instantaneous shift from this team being underdogs to actual contenders, and you want to keep that going, right? So I think you can learn a lot from him. I think that when it's all said and done, Kyrie being here will probably end up being better for the Celtics than it would be bad. But as far as a coach, I mean, names I don't know, right? But we've thrown. Bobby said this a lot on this show, and I think he's right. Brad Stevens feels like the Mark Jackson before Steve Kerr. Right now, if the Celtics can get to the level of winning a championship, sure, maybe Brad can break through that ceiling. But for me, and I said this, a few weeks ago, I'm now starting to think that because Tatum and Brown have not had a coach like Doc Rivers, who is used to coaching all-star players, right? Maybe it's hindered them. I think Brad is the perfect guy to develop and nurture. But now what we see, and what Ray and I have been going at each other for like the last 8 months, he doesn't really know how to handle stars. So you need someone that knows how to do that. I think if this is what we're going to see from the Celtics, if they end up this season 36-36 or like 40 and 32, we have a problem, right? Because the talent level on this team, just in your starting five, should give you 45 wins. You should be able to just write that down no matter what. That's your floor. If you can't hit that, it's coaching. And for me, if Danny Ainge is to blame for this season, but Brad Stevens could take a team that had IT, that had Kelly Olynyk to the playoffs, you can't have it both ways. You know what I mean?
No. So I think honestly, and I'll give a name, right? Just, content purposes, can't have enough of that. But I'm gonna go with Sam Cassell. He played in the NBA 14 years. He was on the 08 Celtics team, so he's played in the city. He hit some big shots and for that team in 08. So I think he's someone that's paid his dues as an assistant. He's been on the dock. He's been there with Ty Lue. And, is he a little bit of a loudmouth and we're getting some people's faces? Sure. But that's what you need at this moment. And once again, he won 3 times. He's been in the NBA forever. And, he knows how to win. And I firmly believe that, he's someone that's not afraid of the moment. He wasn't afraid of the moment as a player. And, I think that would give buy-in right away. Danny knows who he is. Excuse me. And he won't choke just like I did on the show. Excuse me. So that's just how it is. So I think that Sam Cassell is someone that could come in and do a great job and replace Brad Stevens if we're going to attach the name to it. But once again, most Celtics fans fire Brad, get rid of so-and-so. If you don't have a viable option, and I get it, we know, dicks, assholes, it's not your job. We get it. I understand that. But if we're having a conversation, you don't know who to put somebody, you don't know who to put in there, just stop bringing this shit up. Let it go.
Well, and that's the problem we have in so many sports, right? When Patriots fans, and we've heard it, whether it's on radio media or social media in this town, it's few and far between. But people are calling for Bill Belichick's job. And it's like, who do you want? So it's kind of the same thing with Brad Stevens to me, because Mike just said it. We've always said it, that we've been very consistent about that on this show. Brad Stevens is a good coach. We like Brad Stevens. Brad Stevens is a good developer of talent. He's not necessarily a player's coach, though. Not necessarily in the NBA. In college, he might be. But I think, Mike, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, so I think I'm gonna ask the question instead. Have Jayson Tatum and Jaylen Brown outgrown Brad Stevens?
If this is what we're seeing, if the Celtics are truly this team that we're seeing this year and what we saw in the Eastern Conference Finals of last year, then yeah, I think it's over. And I think that, kudos to Brad. He did something that other coaches didn't really want to do. Like, we had a Hall of Fame coach here. Doc Rivers did not want to be part of a rebuild, right? And I held that against him for a long time. Still kind of do. I think Brad was the right guy for that moment. What I'm learning now is, and it's just based off a scoreboard, is that he's not the right guy for this moment. So we need someone in here that is not afraid to get in Jayson Tatum's face, Jaylen Brown's face, Marcus Smart, to calm him down, to scold him after yelling at a referee after Peyton Pritchard hits a game-winning layup, right? Like, you need to keep the team intact. You need a guy that is able to do that. So a guy like Sam Cassell, I think a guy, I don't know what Mark Jackson's doing. What's he doing?
No.
Sam Cassell.
Yeah, Sam Cassell. Granted, he just signed with LA, but I would have taken Ty Lue. Honestly, I would have taken him. You know what I'm saying? Because my thing that if you can sit there and spar with LeBron and J.R. Smith and Kyrie in the same damn locker room, this would be a breeze.
Well, that's why I like Sam Cassell, because he was around so many of those guys. You said it, right? He was never the star, but everybody knows who Sam Cassell is. And he was always that guy that wasn't afraid to not only defend a teammate, but also get in the face of an opposing player, but get in the face of a teammate as well. I mean, he did what he had to do in order to keep things in line. And sometimes it would be nice to see Brad get angry, and he doesn't. And I don't know if people from Indiana just don't get angry. I don't know too many, but I think where we're at right now is, let's see if they can turn this around with 41 and a half games remaining. But if they can't, and they go to the same spot, and Ray gets very frustrated when we talk about the Eastern Conference Finals, it's almost like the George Carlin talked about the 7 dirty words. That's like Ray's 8th dirty word is Eastern Conference Finals. So let's see what happens.
For me personally, it sucks to be having this conversation, right? Because we saw Brad develop the amount of talent that he has so far, and for it to end, if it does end like this, where you were in the Eastern Conference Finals last year, you were a perennial playoff team the last 3 or 4 years. Now, we'll say 45% of the way into the season, You're one game out of playoff contention. You are 1.5 games ahead of the Miami Heat. That's where you are. And they're in 10th, right? So, like, you just can't do this. So if he turns it around, I think that speaks volumes. Like, listen, if they somehow finish this season, again, quick math here, 48-24. That's a huge win. Like, that means that he can take control of the room after starting 15-15 and right the ship. But if you can't, it's time for him to go. Like, love you, mean it. Thank you for all that you did. But now we need someone who can actually corral the talent here.
Yeah, and it wouldn't be a red mark on the history of the Boston Celtics, right? Like,
or Brad, for that matter.
Sure, without a doubt. And Brad Stevens will go on to, maybe he'll work in another city as an NBA coach, or he's going to go back and get and again, we're talking about it like he's out the door. He's not, clearly. And we don't necessarily want him out the door as a collective. But if he does go, he will go on to find a very high-profile job at the college ranks, and he'll be very good at it.
One thing before you go, Ray, I'm just saying it right now. I hope I hope they turn it around. I hope he's our coach for a long time. But if he doesn't, and if he is fired, if Houston does not give him all the money that he wants to develop all their young talent that's going to be coming in over the next 5 years, I don't know what they're doing, because he's proven that he can do it. They have 19 draft picks in the next 4 years, right? Brad's your guy to get you to a perennial playoff team, and you bring someone else in. Go ahead, Ray.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's perfectly said. I think that we want him to do well, but I mean, I was laughing as you said that comment about the 48-24, because that means they would have to go 33-9. That's definitely not happening. But I mean, that's talk about a pipe dream, right? But but a brother can dream. Know what I mean? But I just think that I think this is the worst record they've had since the 2014-2015 season. And you know who got here that same year? Isaiah Thomas. Like, it was just, it was a nice little deal in February they made. They sent a little late first round pick to Phoenix, brought over IT, and instantly that team caught fire. So you know what, Danny? Maybe that's what you have to do. It doesn't have to be a major deal, but you bring in someone like a Terrence Ross. So you bring in someone that's going to score like how IT scored, and you just take off. Obviously, health is always the number one thing. So, I mean, we're not talking about, we get that. Health is always the number one thing. But just making just a little minor tweak where you don't have to, include Tremont Waters or include Carson Edwards in big-time games. As much as I love Carson Edwards and I love what he did in Purdue, I thought he was going to be, a player. Those guys are not NBA ready. They are not NBA players. They should be up in Maine, up at Old Orchard Beach, eating some crabs, because I would love to join them. I'll get on the Downeaster and follow them up there at Old Orchard Beach. But they do not need to be on the parquet floor on Causeway Street at the TD Gardens. It just should not happen. Sorry.
Old Orchard Beach Chamber of Commerce, not a sponsor, but now a friend of a show.
Yes, exactly.
A friend of the show. So you talk about they what's going to help them turn it around. So Ray, you just mentioned an offensive help, but what about a defensive help? Because today the Houston Rockets released Boogie Cousins, and they are still going to have to pay him $2.3 million as part of his guaranteed deal. But with that said, that's a big man who we know Brad isn't necessarily one to go after, but if he's getting $2.3 million already from the Rockets, you would probably have to pay him pennies on the dollar to come here. So, Mike, tell me why Danny Ainge should have been on the phone with Demarcus Cousins' agent 5 minutes after he was released.
Yeah, I think it makes sense for me to go first here. That way Ray can tell me all the reasons why I was wrong, because he's the basketball aficionado. But for me, like, the problem with the Celtics for me is not scoring. They can score. Right, they just can't stop anyone when it matters. So what that tells me is, now if that is an indictment on the fact that the coach does not believe in big men, again, sorry, Brad, you need to go. But if you can get Boogie for $2 million, right, because he's already owed 2.3 this year, and he has something to prove. Remember, he did not play last year because of his ACL. So he still needs to prove that he is a versatile and viable big man in the NBA. So get him in here. And then again, in the fourth quarter, if you have a lead, you can put Demarcus Cousins and Tristan Thompson or Robert Williams on the floor at the exact same time. Eliminate any notion of scoring in the paint and maybe win some of these games that you're up by 18 to 20 points. So that's why I would advocate for Boogie.
So I agree about bringing DeMarcus Cousins, but not for the same reason, right? So he's not a defender. He's not now, anyways. Not with after the Achilles injury. So I feel like we're like 2 years too late. Because I feel like the 2018-2019 year after he got released from New Orleans is when they should have jumped after him. Because he still had some good games in that season, but then kind of got hurt again. So that was the pressing issue. But if he's coming here, you're getting a 6'10" Marcus Smart, and I'm not talking about from a defensive standpoint. I mean, you need someone that's going to be nasty, right? And I've talked about that on the show before. You need someone. DeMarcus Cousins is nasty, and he's going to be someone that's like, look, you come down the lane, I'm going to give you a little, excuse me, elbow. Hey, brother, you're going to think twice about coming down here again before I knock you on your ass type thing. That's what they need. So he's not going to be a Patrick Ewing type defender. He's not going to be a raw.
Don't need
defender.
that. Just need somebody that can get underneath and preserve a 20-point lead.
Right. Right. No, right. But I'm saying you just need someone that's nasty, though, down there.
Yeah, what they need is a guy that's going to make you think twice about driving in, right? And someone that over the last 4 years has averaged 9 defensive rebounds a game. That's what you need. Someone to get the boards, make it think twice, and just play a little grittier in crunch time. And I think for me, and it all goes back to that second game against the Atlanta Hawks last week, right? When Daniel Tice and Robert Williams and even like Tristan Thompson, they all had phenomenal games because the game plan it felt like it was around the bigs, and it worked, right? So they were still up 24 in the fourth. They won the game by 11. The 2 nights later, they're up by 20 from the fourth, and they lost in overtime, right? So focus on bigs. And again, I love Daniel Tice. I think I love Robert Williams' ceiling. But, like, we know what Boogie Cousins is, right? And we know that people will think, like, to your point, will think twice about driving to the hoop on him. So bring him in, and let's see what he can do. Again, if he was owed no money and he was expecting $6 million, no. But 2? You call him. See what it will take.
Yeah, even a couple of years ago when he wanted 5, I'm like, you're telling me we can't take a flyer for $5 million, but then they end up giving, Enes Kanter the same deal. And I was like, really? But I'm like, okay, but that to me was wild. But, because you know what he is right now? Because we had him a couple of years ago, and he actually played very well while he was here. Well, at least for a few games, was Gray Monroe. Gray Monroe couldn't guard a parked car, but he was a phenomenal passer. So was Boogie. He was a great rebounder. So was Boogie. He was someone that the guys loved. Tatum and Brown, those guys loved Gray Monroe. So, and Boogie's been a great teammate his whole career from what I've heard. So, why not make it happen?
So the Celtics sit in 6th place in the Eastern Conference at 15-15, half a game behind the Toronto Raptors and half a game ahead of the New York Knicks, which is sad because the New York Knicks are not a good basketball team. You know what? It's more embarrassing.
I think the New York Knicks are a better basketball team than we gave them credit for, and the Celtics are playing like a worse basketball team than we expected.
Well, they're definitely worse than we expected to this point because I think even the Eastern Conference team had them in 4th finishing, and I think we all kind of agreed that 3-4 spot was going to be where this team finished. And right now, surprisingly, the 76ers are still up there in 1st, and not that big of a surprise, followed by Brooklyn, Milwaukee, and Indiana, and Toronto, and then Boston. So they definitely have some work to do to get to that spot that we expect them to be in because if the playoffs started today, they would be playing Milwaukee in the first round of the playoffs.
Yeah, and if they're playing like they're playing right now, that series would be over in 5, I think. Because, yeah, and that's an indictment on the Celtics. I don't think Milwaukee's great. I think the Celtics would be up by 12 points in every 4th quarter and fucking blow it. That's what I think.
Yeah, I mean, Ray, don't green team it on us. Like, let's be.
Well, I'm saying no. If you had said against Philly or Brooklyn Web in the first round, I'd have been like, yeah, right. But I just my thing is this is the same team that still beat Milwaukee early in the year. Like, I don't think Milwaukee is that good. So I guess that team we'd actually have a shot. But the Brooklyns, the Phillies, and actually we talked about this early because Mike has stumped me on this. Hell, if Indiana had faced us right now, Indiana would beat us too.
Yeah.
That's just what I firmly believe. But Milwaukee, no. It's Giannis against 5. That's literally how they play.
I think Chris Middleton and Giannis right now are – I think if Middleton can do what you said he needed to do, if he can put up 20 a night or 25 points a night, then it's a problem because then there's 55 points coming from 2 people and you don't know what else to do. Middleton's been pretty good this year. So But I think before because it kind of looked like you're going to transition, Joe. Before we transition, can we maybe just say that Marcus Smart's role in this team is actually, I think it's that important, because this thing that's been happening, he's been out, right? They don't have that true gritty guy, that true nasty guy that will go in and fight for you every single play. So I think if I was Marcus, like, you never want your team to lose, but this is just proving how important he is to this team. You can't measure how important to have a guy like that on the court is.
Just real quick, this is what I talk about when I talk about difference in philosophy between Danny Ainge and Brad Stevens. I feel like Danny Ainge is more of an aggressive. He was an aggressive player, so he's an aggressive GM for the most part. I mean, he fleeces teams all the time. And then you have Brad, who to me seems passive in a lot of ways. So you have players playing that style that the coach wants them to, but naturally they're just not that kind of guy. So I just see it as like an oil and water situation where everything looks okay on the surface, but if you really look close, you can see that there's some kind of a split, whether it's in the locker room or even on the floor. And I'm not crying wolf or hitting the panic button here, but it just seems like there's philosophical differences. And that's okay, because I don't think anybody's really upset with anybody on one side or the other. I mean, that's coming from me, who's not the biggest basketball guy. I shouldn't admit that. So just kidding. Yeah, I just think there's a philosophical rift between the players, the GM, and the head coach that needs to be rectified. They're 4-6 in their last 10, but however, today, I mean, let's talk about these two guys before we transition on. Okay, so Tatum and Brown are all-stars. They were
so bad. They're so bad. Oh God, this is so bad. Oh, I'm having a breakdown right now. Jesus, it's so bad.
Don't have a breakdown. Let's talk about the All-Stars. Let's talk about Jayson Tatum and Jaylen Brown and how they were named All-Stars on Tuesday, and we'll be playing in that All-Star game. Tatum just missed being a starter for the East, correct? Real quick, we should talk about this All-Star game, and I'm going to throw this out because am I the only one that thinks this entire situation is silly, to bring the best players in the NBA to Atlanta in the middle of a pandemic when we've already had other issues, and that is also one of the biggest party towns in the country, and these guys self-admittedly like to party? Am I the only one that sees an issue with this?
Yeah, I mean, I'm smiling because I know, I'm like, listen, I would be upset too if I couldn't go to Magic City and get some wings. I completely understand. I totally understand. I get it. I totally get it. You know what I'm saying? So haven't been to Atlanta in a while, but I totally understand. So, but I mean, no, it's not dumb. Like I said, you know, LeBron has spoke against it. Giannis has spoke against it. Honestly, I think Tatum is not really too hot on either, but you know, he's still at the stage of his career where it's like it's still cool to be an all-star and still make that team. So, you know, and the same thing, you know, Jaylen Brown's coming back to his hometown. So I'm pretty sure this is really an honor for him, you know. So, and from what I heard, I think I heard Kendrick Perkins say it, I don't know if it was on the NBC broadcast or on the Full Letter Network, but he had mentioned that they basically, the players are getting flown in the night before, right? So they're getting flown in the night before. They'll be in the hotel doing whatever festivities, and then, you know, they'll have the game Sunday, and then they'll be right back to their teams afterwards. So it seems like they're trying to mitigate some things, but once again, that's what the players are really mad at. They're not mad about necessarily playing the game. They're mad about, you're telling me that we're coming to Atlanta, Georgia, and we can't be here for 3 or 4 days, getting lit, getting drunk, getting some chicken and waffles. You know, we can't do that. I can't go see adult entertainment unless it's on my phone. This is a problem. Like, so that's what they're really upset about. No, I mean, definitely not. But I'm just saying, like, you know, no, but like, definitely not. But I understand, like, that's what they're really upset about. It's like, man, like, we can't do X, Y, and Z. So they just want to be restricted. I don't have the idea of being restricted.
I don't know. I don't know if LeBron's upset about being restricted. I mean, LeBron's a family man now. He's upset about doing it in the middle of a pandemic, and it's actually one of the, I mean, LeBron is LeBron. I mean, he's one of the greatest of all time. You know, say what you want about LeBron, positively or negatively. I kind of feel like I feel the same way about LeBron as I do about Tom Brady, not to open that Pandora's box right now.
No, Joe.
But I do. I do. I just think he needs to concentrate on what he's doing, and he does.
Well, LeBron James built and funded a school.
You're absolutely right. You're 100% right. But what I'm saying is that to get back to the point, I agree with LeBron James on this when he comes out and says that he has concerns about playing this All-Star game. He said he has concerns about actually doing it, the process. So some guys may have a problem with not staying there for three or 4 days, but man, you got to be responsible in a situation like this. So put your whole team and the entire league in question if you give these guys the ability to go out and do what they want. And that's not an indictment on those guys, because listen, I would do the same thing, right? But that's just...
Yeah, I think it's just misguided to have an all-star game during a pandemic. I think that it's just it. Like you have to condense your season, but you're still going to include an all-star game, which doesn't make any sense to me. And I think for the players, they feel the same way. But for the fact of the matter, there is going to be one. You have two players on your team, Jayson Tatum averaging 26 points, Jaylen Brown averaging 25.5 points per game. You have a tandem like that that's putting up 51 points per game on average. It's where I think if you go back to that Brooklyn trade, right, that Danny made and gave away, Paul and KG and got all those picks. Now this is what you have. And I think that the trade ended up being a win for both teams, but kudos to Jayson and Jaylen. I think I have a negative thought about the All-Star game because of what happened last year in Kemba. I think he was never the same after that game. Like, he played that game hurt, and we know it. Everyone knows it. And then he was just out and gone and really hasn't been the same Kemba since. There have been flashes here, but I think it's great for them to be recognized as the best, in their field. But for me, this isn't a time to have an all-star game. In reality, it'd be really cool if they were we're not going to go. We're going to stay and actually listen to Brad Stevens for the next 2 weeks and learn how to play basketball his way.
Well, they'd give the guys 5 days off. And that was one thing that LeBron talked about, is that they could take 5 days off and not have to be at the facility. So in theory, in theory, you're absolutely right, Mike. But I mean,
I actually have a theory though. So just for this season, because obviously, hopefully, things are closer to normal going into the 21-22 season. But, only because if Adam Silver and the rest of the NBA officials had said, hey, we promised you guys that we weren't going to have an all-star game, amidst the pandemic, but then once again, players, I have to come back to y'all players. You guys agreed to this because you knew there was more money involved. Don't play the martyr role and come out here like, man, it's a pandemic. I shouldn't be. No, you're mad about not getting wings and seeing adult entertainment. That's what you're really mad about. You want to get paid, and it's okay. That's fine. Just admit that. Be honest. But if I'm Adam Silver, if you want to save face, why not say, you know what? How about after the season, those that were considered an all-star, why don't you come down to Atlanta after the season, after the regular season, or even after the finals, right? You just come down, we'll do a weekend event in Atlanta, and you just go from there. Because who knows, maybe more people have the vaccine, maybe we have other stuff in place, that more protocols, and you do it like that for this year. But that's the only grade they should have. But once again, the players, hey man, chill out, get off the high horse. You wanted to get more money, which is fine. I understand that. So shout out to Chris Paul and Kyrie and Jaylen Brown, those that lead the Players Association. Y'all wanted more money. You wanted more wings. You wanted more entertainment. I understand that.
That's true. The Players Association
ball game.
They did sign the contract for the All-Star game. We're going to transition now away from the Boston Celtics. We're going to stay in the same building, though. We're going to pick the floor up. We're going to turn the temperature down, and we're going to talk about the Boston Bruins, who just played a game out in Lake Tahoe. But as Mike mentioned, not on an actual lake. It was just on the fairway of the 18th hole of the golf course. But the Boston Bruins are 11-3-2 in the Atlantic Division, a division we thought was going to be harder. I didn't expect them to be 11-3-2. 24 points, first in the Atlantic Division. They're 7-2-1 in their last 10. And as I mentioned to Mike before the show, and he was like, "Oh yeah, they're pretty good. They're 11-3-2." I said, "Well, that means they're actually really 11-5." But 11-5 is still good. That can win your division in the NFL, right? So, Mike, I'm going to let you lead it off with your thoughts on the Bruins here, because they are having a good season overall.
This is really tough for me, right? Because you're sitting here at 11-3-2, and before the season started, we saw how the play was going to be broken down, and we all said this is going to be a really tough year. So far, they're doing great. Tuukka's playing out of his mind. We have, Pastrnak, and everyone's doing their job. Like in that respect, you have Marchand leading the team with 20 points, Bergeron 19 points, Pastrnak 4. Like that's what you want to see. 16, or 9 goals for Marchand, 7 for Bergeron, 9 for Pastrnak. That's great. Tuukka's playing really well. So like kudos to them. But we won a President's Trophy, or would have won it last year, right? We also won that, I believe, in 2014 or a couple years ago. And what happened? The real Tuukka Rask showed up in the playoffs. So for me, it's hard. So I'm like trying to walk this line, right? They're just doing all the right things. They're 7-2-1 in the last 10. They're a plus 15 point differential between them and everybody else. But I just know I have this feeling in my gut that tells me that come playoff time, Tuukka's going to have cramps. Pastrnak's going to go do handstands in the north end or punch a wall and take himself out of it and not be where he needs to be or be the player that he needs to be. So great. They're going to have a great regular season. Honestly, I said this before in the chat, and I'll say it again now so you guys can all hold me against it. I don't care if they go – let's see, they're playing, 56 games this year, right? So I don't care if they go 51-3-2. I still wouldn't buy them to win the Stanley Cup because of who their goaltender is.
Jeez, Mike, you're so negative, but I agree. I agree because, Tuukka's played out of his mind. Halaka's played out of his mind. I mean, you look at Tuukka, he's 7-2-1 on the season. Jaro Halak is 4-1-1. They went out, they were having a blast. It looks like they're clicking as a team. They went out to the West Coast. They show up in their 90s garb and they got the mullets going and they're having a good time. It was Patrice's idea and they're really vibing right now as a squad, right? So the chemistry is good. Everybody's playing well. Things are moving in the right direction. But it's interesting watching these games, which has been tough because while I do love YouTube TV, not a sponsor, they and NESN could not agree on a contract. So the day that I switched to YouTube TV, they dropped NESN. So, I mean, if anybody from YouTube TV or NESN is listening, I would really love to be able to watch all the games again. But following along with the season, it's been interesting to watch because they're above average, not great. It is really where I see this team. Defensively, they're having a tough time. Their right wing is not always strong. They've been bit with the injury bug the last couple games, but they've made it work. Granted, they have had no COVID issues of their own. They have played or been scheduled to play 2 teams, including Buffalo, where they had 2 games postponed because Buffalo had COVID issues. So they've had a couple of bumps in the road on that standpoint. But Mike, I can't totally disagree. I think the better barometer for a season like this season is that 2014 President's Cup trophy win. And the only reason is last year was such a weird year. And I think we've seen, whether it's been professional athletes, our own personal lives within our jobs, we've seen people with interesting mentalities and make interesting decisions and just do things that aren't necessarily in character because we're dealing with such an unprecedented time in our lives that I don't know if we can use last season as a good barometer, but when Tuukka effectively abandoned the team and maybe we don't know the reason, and it probably was a good reason because now he's playing out of his mind and everybody seemed to have taken him back in. So I think there's a whole hell of a lot to the story that we don't know. But you're still right because he still crumbles under pressure of the playoffs. And I don't think this team is good enough from top to bottom to go ahead. So while you talk about some of the off ice stuff getting in the way and then Tuukka's performances in the playoffs, I think the on ice team themselves doesn't necessarily have what it takes. And I hope that Bruce Cassidy isn't the issue. And we're having a Brad Stevens conversation about the Bruins in 2021-22, but I can't disagree. But right now they're playing so well and they need to keep that up. And honestly, I think this trip outside of the Eastern time zone was great for them.
Yeah, I think, listen, it's hard to say what I just said and it not diminish like what they've done so far. And I'm not trying to do that.
No, I wasn't trying to say that you were.
No, I know, but I'm like carrying it back. I'm like, well, you just kind of sound like an asshole. But in reality, like Tuukka Rask is 298 wins, 160 losses in regular season. It's pretty good, right? Like that's really good. In the playoffs, he's 51-42. So something happens. And that's not all his fault at all. I'm not saying that at all. I think I said it last year, but on this show, Tuukka makes all of the hard saves look easy and doesn't make any of the easy saves. That's just a fact. He does that the most in the playoffs. So for me, like what you need to see out of this team consistently, and for me, I mean, maybe the listeners out there are different and they can be swayed. I need to see the first line, and I need to see players like Marchand, like Bergeron always shows up. I'll never, ever take anything away from him. He played with a punctured lung or collapsed lung. But you need to see Pastrnak step up in the playoffs. You need to see McAvoy stay healthy and step up in the playoffs. If those things happen and Tuukka is still soft as shit, fine. You can still make a deep run. But I fundamentally believe that Tuukka will be the reason why they never win a cup. Again, with Tuukka as a goaltender.
Yeah, well, I'll chime in and add on to that. So you guys are giving great analysis so far. To me, they're no different than the 2016, 2017 Boston Red Sox, right? Team that has talent, team is going to win a division. And then, when they get there, it's like, oh, David Price, you can't pitch. Chris Sale, you can't pitch. So now we're getting, like I said, so now those guys that you translate to the Pastrnaks, like I said, Bergeron is always showing up, but there's other guys that need to be key players that haven't always done it when it's mattered most. So, the first line has been what I said when we did our NHL preview show. That can be in the show notes, so you can listen back to that. The first line is still the best first line to me in all of hockey. Like I'm not swaying from that. When you have, Marchand has been great, Bergeron has been great, Pastrnak has been great so far. Nick Ritchie has been a pleasant surprise too. I think he has 13 points on the season, 6 goals, 7 assists. So that's pretty cool to see. We do have a couple of defensemen that's in the minus when it comes to plus and minus. So I don't know if that works the same way as it does in basketball, but if it does, it means your defensemen suck. But I do know a guy that went over in DC, but we're not going to bring that back up this evening because I want to stay in a good mood until I go to sleep. So we'll let that go. But at the same time, that has to change. And once again, like Mike said it, Joe said it, Craig feels the same way too, even though he's not speaking, he's just listening to us. We no longer are satisfied with doing well in the regular season. It's the same thing, with the Celtics. Like this city, once again, from 2001 to now, if you want to say we've been ruined and we're the most spoiled fans, call it what you want. This was long before the 2001 era. So, and once again, especially with the Bruins, they've seen guys like Esposito, they've seen guys like Barbie Orr, they've seen guys like Terry O'Reilly, they've seen guys like Cam Neely, they've seen guys like Ray Bourque, who wasted 21 freaking years here, and as soon as his ass went west to Colorado, up in the Mile High Mountains, his ass won with Patrick Waugh. This is not something that we just woke up and said, well, they got to win, they got to do this. They got to find a way to get it done when it matters most, like Mike said. 51-42, guess what, Tuukka? That means you mediocre, dog. And we don't need that around here. If that's the case, put me on the ice. Let me roll around once my ankle feels better. But let me roll around and do what I can do. You know what I'm saying? Like maybe I could be the missing piece, right? This belly can hold a lot of different goals. I can move from a 90%. I can move from a 90% save rate. That's where Tuukka's at, to maybe a 92 or 93. Because 90 is decent, but it's not where he should be, like at a 92.3 or a 92.5. Maybe a 93%, right? So that's where he needs to be. So 90 is okay. He's getting away with that because Boston is like, we're killing everybody as far as scoring, as we just beat Philly the other night 7-3. So I get that, but he needs to get to that 92 and 93 clip to be really elite. Right now, he's just he's coasting because we have a good team and they're scoring a lot, but that it's going to have to uptick a couple of percentage points in order for him to be elite and for us to get to where we want to go, which is the Stanley Cup.
Yeah, I mean, I just think, for me, you gave Tuukka that huge contract. So when you pay a goaltender $8 million a year, he can't be the reason that you don't win. Maybe he's not the reason that you win a cup, which is fine. You just can't lose it for us, right? You can't be the person or the thing that halts a playoff run. And for me, consistently, it has been him. Last year, for me, when he left, I know that there was a family emergency. I get it. I'm glad everybody's okay. Optics wise, you should have canceled your tee time the day that you got back into Boston the next day. You know what I mean? Like, you can't show up and play golf. You just can't do that. It looks bad. It looks like you quit. Couple that with the fact that he said he didn't want to be there. It was hockey in July or August, whatever it was. Didn't sound right. Guy's playing out of his mind right now. Let me ask you guys a question, Joe. I'll ask you, Joe. I know you're the host, but I want to ask you this question. Tuukka's playing out of his mind, right? Great, just a great year so far statistically. You know, as Ray said, 901 save percentage, not great. 2.5 goals against average, also not great. In nut cutting time, you are down, or let's say you are tied 1-1. Do you trust him to not give away that game in the playoffs?
No, I put Jaro Halak in. But what coach is going to make that decision? Is Bruce Cassidy going to, in the third quarter of Game 7 of the Stanley Cup? We did, but but this is the fine line between who Tuukka Rask and who Jaro Halak are, right? Jaro Halak is a great middle reliever, to put it in baseball terms. He can come in and eat up innings when the starter isn't getting the job done or needs to come out because he's tired. And that's what Tuukka is. Tuukka is the starter. He's the entire starting rotation for this Bruins team. He is playing out of his mind. He could be playing better. I also put a little bit of it on the defense. I think the defense has been lacking. I think Ray already mentioned part of what it's lacking, and that's a little bit of senior leadership, but it is lacking something. I don't know if it's lacking someone, but it's lacking something. So, but what coach is going to make that decision? Sure, if it's 1-1, if I'm playing NHL 21 and it's the third period of Game 7 of the Stanley Cup, and I look and I know as a Bruins fan, all right, this is who Tuukka Rask is. I have Jaro Halak on my bench. I am putting Jaro Halak in the game at that exact point because we know who Tuukka is. And it's interesting because is Tuukka not a glorified number 2 in a lot of ways? He's a great goaltender. We've already talked about it. His numbers in the regular season are incredible, and they always have been. But when he was behind Tim Thomas and he was the number 2, that was one of the best 1-2 tandems. It maybe this generation, but maybe of all time for a team that went on to win a Stanley Cup. So I don't know. I don't think I would make that decision if I were the actual head coach of the Boston Bruins, which will never happen. But I see where you're going with it.
Yeah, I think for me, like, listen, Ray brought up a really good point about the defense, right? Is, you know, right now their record is skewed by the fact that they have such a large positive point differential. They're just scoring a lot right now. Now, if that is maintained throughout the regular season and the postseason, all right, then maybe we have something here. But what we've seen from these Bruins teams before under Cassidy, right, is Thanksgiving through New Year's, they're kind of 500, and then they take off to the end of the season. And then a week before the playoffs, they kind of skid into it. And in the playoffs, it's a dogfight in round 1, and then they're out. They make it to the cup, and then they're just out finessed. So again, I'm not a puckhead. I'm not the biggest hockey guy here, but here are the things that I know. If for this team to win a Stanley Cup, Tuukka Rask has to play the way that he's played all year and not bail on the team, not mentally, not physically, not anything. He needs to be there and be present. Pastrnak needs to not be afraid to finish a check or take a check. He needs to be a physical presence as much as he possibly can be out there on the ice, and the defense needs to hold up. If that happens, they're a Stanley Cup contender. My gut is telling me, though, that not all those 3 things will happen.
What blows my mind about it, too, and looking at the numbers, is that Pastrnak is already playing the way that you want him to play, and then he's expected to play in the way the entire city of Boston wants him to play. He missed 7 games to start the year. He's 3rd on the team in points.
Yeah.
I mean,
he's that good.
He's tied. He's that good. He's tied with Marchand in goals with 9, and he has 5 assists, but I mean, that's 14 points in 9 games. You're absolutely right. I think they have a good thing going. And like we said, we don't want to diminish their success. Maybe there's a move for a defenseman at some point. Craig Smith has come in and done a job, 3 goals and 4 assists in 15 games. So everything's clicking. They're playing well. I just think they're above average, not great right now, because there's something missing somewhere. So I think that kind of answers our other question. Actually, it kind of answers our last 2 questions there, Mike, of are they for real and will they fail? But let's ask that question to the room. I mean, what is their ceiling? for the 2021 season. Now that they've returned from Lake Tahoe, they're playing well. They're 11-3-2. They're playing a 56-game season. So, and they're going to play the same opponents the whole way through. What's their ceiling this year?
Yeah, I mean, I think so. Regular season wise, their ceiling is the President's Trophy, right? I think that they're that good. I think. I mean, in a world where they're all healthy and there's like we're in a vacuum, right? So if everything is like it is now, yes, President's Trophy, sure. Maybe the second or third round of the playoffs, maybe, because I just think, and again, I'll take a hit for this. I hope that they prove me wrong. Like I really do. He's just not the guy. Tuukka is just he will never be the guy that Tim Thomas was in 2011 that puts the team on his back and is the reason why you win a Stanley Cup, in my opinion, based on what I've seen.
Yeah, but you just say he doesn't have to be the reason. You say he can't lose it. So, I mean, my thing is like, are you looking to get like a Lundqvist? Are you looking to get a Patrick Waugh to come through the door? Are you looking to get a Jonathan Quick? What do you look? I mean, are you looking for that type of guy to come in here? Because I'm like, a Rick DiPietro. Like, who are you looking for?
Personally, I'm looking for him to be Tim Thomas just for one series in the playoffs. Just for one series, not an entire run. Be the reason we win a series.
Yeah, listen. I mean, at this point, like he definitely owes us. Like I said, I do think they had a good chance last year, but obviously we know what happened. So, and you owe us from Game 7 a couple years ago against St. Louis. At the crib. And you lose a Game 7. On your home ice. So that's unacceptable.
Can't happen.
Yeah, can't let it happen for sure.
One of my biggest concerns is looking back at last year when they went away on that break after COVID shut down everything. When they came back finally and they went into the bubble, they were out of shape. They were lazy, and they
meaning like Pasternak,
just the Boston Celtics in general. I just don't think that they wanted to be there. And you know what? What's interesting is I love, and this is going to be a really petty thing, and Ray's going to love this comment, but I did love when Tuukka was like, oh, it just doesn't feel right. It's hockey in July. And it's like, well, you know what? In the Southern Hemisphere, that's winter, and that's when they would play hockey. So get over yourself and get on the ice. Unless there's a real emergency, which there seemingly was. So, but I just think that
right, exactly.
Right when they came back, they just weren't all there, and it showed through the playoffs. And I just hope that there isn't a similar mentality. It doesn't look like there's a similar mentality this year, but I just hope there isn't.
I just to put a punctuation mark on this sentence of the Bruins, right? It doesn't look like that this year because there's been no adversity. We know what happens when Tuukka hits adversity. He crumbles historically. So don't do that this year. Prove me wrong. Prove us all wrong. If you do that, if there are skids in this season where it looks bad, like maybe they lose 3 games, and then Tuukka pitches a shutout, and then he does it again. He's the reason why you start winning again. All right, then you show me that you're in. You're in, and so we need one of those moments. I don't know if we're going to get it because the offense is clicking so well. If we do and he proves us wrong, great. But I just have this feeling, man. I just don't believe in him. I don't.
Well, we'll see what happens. There's plenty of season left in the NBA and in the NHL, and we're going to watch it unfold, and we'll be here every week to tell you guys about it. Ray, did you remember what you were going to say earlier?
I did not, but I'm looking at the Celtics blow another freaking game. I'll tell you that. That's probably what it was tied to. I love it. You're right there. You're up by 1. And I said, what could go wrong? And they just can't score. They cannot deliver. Brett Stevens, you blow. Denny Ainge. I'm sick of it, Joe. I'm sick of that team. I'm sick of them acting like, they've arrived and they haven't. Brett Stevens, you are not Bill Belichick. You cannot come up there with these stoic ass answers after the game. Well, we tried to guard Luka Doncic tonight, but he just wasn't. It just wasn't our night, man. It's every freaking night that it's not your night, man. Damn, it's every night it's not your night. When is it going to be your night, Brad?
Well, it's only not been their night 16 of 31 nights, right? So let's give them the benefit of that.
That makes it so
49% of the time.
I'm just going to tell you right now that they're going to win this game. Like they're going to.
Well, the listeners who have made it this far, the listeners who have made it this far will already know, but something I want to bring up, guys, and I didn't realize it until we were doing this show, but we still haven't mentioned it. But 13 days ago, I'll just say 2 weeks ago, we passed our 6-month anniversary as a podcast. I don't know if you guys knew that.
Happy anniversary.
I just wanted to throw that out there. And
6 months, 6,000 downloads. We'll take that.
We'll absolutely take that. And I didn't get you guys anything, but I appreciate you coming in tonight, talking some Celtics and some Bruins. And of course, as always, we appreciate the help of our EP, Craig. We know that he'll be pulling his hair out as he edits this and swearing at. No, I'm just kidding. This will be a good one for you, Craig. But again, Rayshawn, welcome back to the team. We're glad you're on the mend and doing well.
Yeah, it was good to be back for Black History Month, so I appreciate that.
Well, we can't go the whole month of February without you on the show, Rayshawn.
Yeah, it's true. Exactly.
It's true. It would have been of your own accord. I don't know if we
right. No, for sure. Yeah.
But
oh god, I was waiting all night to say that.
He waited an hour to say that.
Perfect.
But for Rayshawn Buchanan, Mike, do you have anything else to say?
You want me to try and follow that? No, Joe.
No, absolutely not. Mike Marcangelo, I'm your host, Joe Malkin. We'll talk to you next time.
Welcome to the Reverie Channel, where entertainment knows no bounds. Live concerts, on-demand music, documentaries, and short films, all in stunning HD. Now on Roku TV, Apple TV, and Amazon Fire. Immerse yourself from home. And on Android and iOS for those on the move. Support creators with crowdfunding donations. Fuel their creativity. Join us in shaping entertainment's future. The Reverie Channel, where every view, every donation matters.
Hey, what's happening out there, everybody? This is Lawrence Ross, and I'd like to tell you a little bit about my podcast, The Lawrence Ross Show.
Egomaniac.
It's a 2-hour weekly exploration into my mind. I also do sketches, celebrity impersonations.
You're out of order!
And I also do song parodies. Not too shabby for a blind guy.
Not only are you visually impaired, but you are geographically impaired.
New episodes are released every Friday. Check it out on your favorite podcasting platform or listen to it here on Society 13 on Electrocast.
Electrocast.